You're sitting on the floor of your apartment at 11 at night, laptop open, 3 different browser tabs of your own bank accounts pulled up side by side, and you're doing something you've never actually done before in 34 years of having money pass through your hands. You're adding it all up, honestly, in one place, at the same time. $412 in checking. $1,100 in a savings account you opened 4 years ago and never touched again. $6,200 in credit card debt, spread across 2 cards, one of which you'd genuinely forgotten the balance of until this exact moment. A 401k from a job you left 2 years ago that you never rolled over, currently worth $9,400, quietly sitting somewhere you couldn't have named without logging in to check. You do the actual math, the real total, for the first time in your adult life, and the number that comes back is smaller than you expected and somehow also more embarrassing than you expected, not because it's negative, but because you realize, sitting there on the floor at 11 at night, that you genuinely didn't know it until this exact moment. 34 years old, and you never once, not seriously, sat down and looked at the whole picture at the same time. You close the laptop. You don't do anything dramatic that night, no vow, no manifesto. You just go to bed thinking, for the first time, that maybe not knowing was the actual problem, more than any single number on any single screen. The moment everything changes usually isn't a triumphant one. It's just the specific, quiet discomfort of finally looking directly at something you'd spent years managing to avoid looking at straight on. This is the part almost nobody shows you honestly, because the transformation stories people share are usually about the big dramatic win, the 6-figure exit, the retirement announcement. Almost nobody shows you the actual first 12 months, the unglamorous ones, where the real shift happens, quietly, month by month, long before there's any big number worth bragging about at all. Month 1, the audit. You spend the first month doing almost nothing except looking, honestly, at everything you'd been avoiding, every subscription still charging your card for services you forgot you signed up for, every fee your bank has been quietly collecting for years, the actual interest rate on that credit card debt, which turns out to be worse than you'd let yourself remember. You cancel 4 subscriptions in a single sitting, save yourself $61 a month, an amount that would have felt embarrassingly small a month earlier and now feels like the first real evidence that attention, applied directly, produces something measurable. You call your credit card company, for the first time in your adult life, and ask, directly, whether there's a lower rate available, a conversation that takes 11 minutes and saves you 4 percentage points simply because you finally asked a question you never once thought to ask before. Your roommate, Delphine, notices the change first, catches you at the kitchen table one evening with 3 months of bank statements printed out, actually printed, spread across the surface like evidence in a case you're finally investigating. You okay? She asks, half joking, and you tell her the truth, you're not upset. You're just, for the first time, actually paying attention, and the paying attention itself feels like the biggest change so far, bigger than any dollar amount it's produced. Month 1 doesn't make you richer. It makes you honest, for the first time, about a situation you'd been managing through avoidance instead of information, and the honesty alone turns out to be worth more than any single fix you make during it. Month 2, the debt. You build your first real plan this month, not a vague intention to pay it down eventually, but an actual number, an actual date, a specific amount you commit to sending toward the higher interest card every single week regardless of how the week went. The plan isn't complicated. You'd half expected, going in, that serious financial change required some sophisticated strategy you hadn't yet learned, and you discover, instead, that the actual mechanism is almost insultingly simple. Pay the highest interest rate first, pay it aggressively, and stop adding anything new to either card while you do. You cut your delivery app usage from 4 times a week to once, a change that stings for exactly 9 days and then, strangely, stops stinging at all, replaced by a specific, quiet satisfaction in watching an actual number shrink every week instead of staying flat the way it has for years. Delphine, watching this unfold, starts asking you real questions now instead of joking ones, genuinely curious rather than concerned, and you find yourself, for the first time, actually enjoying explaining what you're doing, a specific pride you didn't expect to feel over something as unglamorous as an interest rate spreadsheet. Month 2 teaches you that most of what felt like an overwhelming problem was actually just an unexamined one, and the moment you examine it directly, the actual solution turns out to be far more boring, and far more achievable, than the problem ever let you believe it was. Month 3, the first real emergency fund. You open a separate account this month, specifically labeled, specifically untouched, and you fund it with $100 a week, an amount you'd have called impossible 3 months earlier and now find, having cut the subscriptions and the delivery habit, entirely manageable without feeling deprived in any way you actually notice day to day. The real shift this month isn't the dollar amount, which is still modest, barely over $1,000 by month's end. It's the specific, physical relief you feel the week your car needs an unexpected repair. For $100, a bill that 18 months earlier would have gone straight onto the credit card you're currently trying to pay off, and instead comes directly out of the fund you built for exactly this purpose, without a single moment of panic, without a single new charge added to a debt you're finally watching shrink instead of grow. Month 3 teaches you the actual purpose of an emergency fund, which has nothing to do with the size of the number and everything to do with the specific, physical difference between an unexpected bill that costs you money and an unexpected bill that costs you money and also your entire sense of stability at the same time. Month 4, the first real conversation about income. This is the month you finally ask for the raise you'd been quietly deserving for over a year, a conversation you'd avoided specifically because some part of you had never felt, until now, that you had the standing to ask for it directly. You prepare for the conversation the way you've started preparing for everything this year, honestly, with actual numbers, market rates for your role, a specific list of contributions from the last 12 months, a clear ask instead of a vague hope. Your manager says yes, more easily than you expected, an 8% increase that feels, in the moment, both smaller than you'd hoped and larger than you'd have ever asked for 4 months earlier, before any of this started. You realize, walking out of that meeting, that the conversation was never really about the 8%. It was about discovering, for the first time, that you were capable of having a direct, unemotional conversation about your own value, a skill that had nothing to do with money specifically and everything to do with the same honesty you'd been practicing on your bank statements for 3 months, finally pointed at a person instead of a spreadsheet. Month 4 teaches you that taking money seriously was never really about the numbers at all. It was about developing the specific, transferable courage to look directly at things, bills, debts, and eventually your own worth, instead of managing them through avoidance the way you had for over a decade. Month 6, the first real investment. You open a retirement account this month, roll over the old 401k you'd forgotten about, and set up an automatic monthly contribution for the first time in your adult life, a number that feels small in the moment, and, you're beginning to understand by now, isn't really about being small or large at all. It's about existing consistently, on a schedule, regardless of how any individual month feels. Delphine, who's been watching this whole transformation unfold from 6 feet away at the same kitchen table for half a year now, asked you to help her do the same thing, a request that surprises you more than almost anything else that's happened this year, because it means the change you started quietly, alone, on the floor of your apartment in month 1 has become something visible enough that someone else wanted a piece of it. You help her open her own account that same week, walking her through the exact process you just went through yourself, and you notice, doing it, a specific satisfaction that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with usefulness, the same feeling, you realize, that used to come from other parts of your life before you'd let so much of your attention get absorbed by financial anxiety you'd never actually examined directly. Month 6 teaches you that the changes you make quietly, for yourself, eventually become visible enough to matter to other people too, and that the specific pride of helping someone else start the same process you just finished exceeds almost anything the money itself has produced so far. Month 9, the first real test. Your car needs a much bigger repair this month, an actual emergency, $1,200, more than double the size of your entire emergency fund. And this is the month that actually tests whether any of the previous 8 months of quiet, unglamorous work amounts to anything real under real pressure. You cover it, mostly from the fund, the remainder from a specific, temporary pause in the retirement contribution rather than the credit card, a decision that would have been unthinkable a year earlier and now feels, simply, like the obvious choice, because the whole system you've built over the previous 8 months was designed specifically for a moment exactly like this one. You resume the retirement contribution the following month, on schedule, exactly as planned, and the emergency fund rebuilds itself within 6 weeks, faster than you expect, because the habits underneath it are, by now, no longer effortful. They're just how you live. Month 9 teaches you that the entire point of the previous 8 months was never the specific dollar amounts, which were always modest. It was building a system sturdy enough to absorb a real hit without collapsing back into the version of you sitting on the floor at 11 at night, discovering a number you'd been avoiding for years. Month 12, the audit again. You do the exact same exercise you did on night 1, a full year later, laptop open, every account pulled up side by side, adding the real total honestly, the same way you did 12 months earlier, except this time you're not avoiding anything, because there's nothing left, by this point, that you've been avoiding. The credit card debt is gone, paid off in month 8, 3 weeks ahead of the original plan. The emergency fund sits at $3,200, rebuilt fully after the repair in month 9. The retirement account, small still, in absolute terms, but growing every month on a schedule that no longer requires any willpower to maintain. You're not rich. You want to be honest about that. Even now, even having done all this work, the actual net worth increase over 12 months is modest, real but modest, nowhere close to the kind of number that changes a life by itself. What's actually changed, you realize, closing the laptop the same way you closed it a year earlier, isn't primarily the number at all. It's the specific, total absence of the feeling you had that first night, the low hum of not knowing, the quiet dread of an unopened statement, the reflexive avoidance that had organized more of your daily anxiety than you'd ever let yourself notice until you finally stopped looking away from it. 12 months of taking money seriously doesn't usually make you rich. It makes you honest, first, and then, slowly, it makes you calm, and it turns out the calm was the actual goal the whole time, disguised, for over a decade, as a problem you thought only a much bigger number would ever be able to solve. Delphine's at the kitchen table when you close the laptop, working on her own spreadsheet now, a full year into her own version of this exact process, and she asks you, the way she's asked you every few months since month 1, how the numbers look this time. You tell her the truth, better, not dramatically, not the kind of better that makes for an exciting story, just steadily, consistently, month over month, better, and she nods, satisfied, and goes back to her own numbers, and you sit there for a moment in a kitchen that looks exactly the same as it did a year ago, in an apartment that costs the same, in a life that would look, from the outside, almost entirely unchanged. It isn't unchanged. You just understand, finally, 12 months in, that the biggest changes were never going to be visible from the outside at all. They were going to be the specific, quiet difference between a person who avoids the number and a person who knows it, and once you crossed that line, sitting on your own floor at 11 at night, everything after it, month by month, was simply the slow, unglamorous work of proving to yourself that the honesty was worth having in the first place.